Hello and welcome to the podcast. Today, Dr. Mylea Charvate joins Dr. Wessels in a discussion of resiliency, coaching, and being an entrepreneur. We hope you enjoy it.
And we're going to talk a little bit about what it's like to be an entrepreneur and some of the things that, we thought were unique to us, and then later on found out that virtually everybody was feeling the exact same way. I'm thinking here about kind of that isolation a little bit. Did you ever feel that?
Oh, yeah. I think, especially as a solo founder, I didn't have a co-founder, which made it even worse. Although, I had started to form a CEO network, which really did help me. And the way that I found my CEO network was actually through my coaches. So I had two CEO coaches. They were fabulous. And they helped me get to know other CEOs that they were coaching and working with. And then all of a sudden, through them and through also a consulting group that I hired, I was networked in with other people who were facing the same things that I was facing. So those connections really did help me feel less alone. But it is true that it's a very isolating role to have that level of pressure. You have the pressure of the responsibility for your customers. You have the responsibility for your employees. You have the responsibility for your investors. You have a fiduciary duty to your board. You have everybody thinking, oh, it must be so nice to not have a boss. And you feel like you have 20 bosses, right? Because all those people I just mentioned feel like your boss. They feel like the person and the people that you're accountable to. And so, I went from being accountable to one person when I was at Stanford to I've got all of these people pushing and pulling on me.
And I hired them.
And I hired them, or I chose them as my investors. I took their money, and
now they're really scary sometimes.
And now, like, oh my God, and right, and what do I know about running a sales organization? So I hire this really experienced sales VP, but how do I manage that person? Because how do I know if they're just selling me a line or if they're really good at their job? Well, the numbers will tell the story over time. But then
we don't have that much time.
We don't have that much time. And if they don't tell the right story, then I'm explaining to my board, one of those other people that I'm accountable to, one of those other groups, how I made a bad decision and let it set too long. Right. So it was very lonely and it was very scary, but was having a really good coach. My CEO coach was the one person in the world who they were 100% on my side. They were there to keep me safe, keep me in my job, help me make good decisions, help me execute well. They didn't have other interests like their LPs or their team at the company pulling on them against what they thought I really needed to do. And that having that support and that person in my corner, and they were a team that worked together, kind of like you and I worked together, really helped me a lot.
So why don't more? I mean, I've a couple of the startups we're working with. I had to grab them metaphorically by the neck and drag them into a CEO group so that they could get out of their own echo chambers and at least talk to each other. Getting them to stop and get coaching.
Yeah.
But it takes sometimes an act of Congress for someone to stop running in multiple directions and sit down with someone and go, no, this, then this, then this. Why do you think more founders, because founders aren't stupid.
No.
Founders are sometimes the smartest people that you remember from class. At least I'm not, but many are. And they do all this stuff because of talent, grit, push, all that ambition,
drive, ambition
inside.
Yeah.
So how on earth if I'm a founder, I'm going, coaching sounds like I'm not in baseball. Why do I need a coach?
Why do professional athletes need a coach? Why does Michael Jordan need a coach? Why does why does Katie Ledecky, one of the world's greatest swimmers, why does she have a coach? Why does Simone Biles have a coach? Because
they're athletes. Are we as CEOs athletes?
Yes, we are. I think of this as a performance. I think if this job, founding CEO, startup CEO, it is an endurance sport. right? You are running a marathon at a sprint. You have to run a marathon at a sprint. So you're going to run 26 miles like you're running the half mile. That's the job. And it turns out to do that well on your own is as impossible as it is for, right, the San Francisco Giants to win the World Series without a coach. Ain't going to happen, right? Because part of what
might not happen anyway, but
at
least they've got a coach.
I'm not going to say that out. I live in San Francisco, so I don't want to say that out loud.
Okay,
yeah. Get fruit thrown at me, but it's not going to happen without a coach. Mm-hmm. And yeah, I think that, any job, whether it's that of an athlete or a CEO, that requires a very high level of individual as well as team performance, because it's both. You need a coach because you're balancing individual performance against your team performance. And what I mean by that is there's part of your job as a CEO that is just to be the leader and to be the person in charge and to do that. But there's another part of your job that's to be in the group and be part of the team and part of the company, and balancing those things and those decision styles and that way of interacting is really, really challenging. It is as hard as it is to be Michael Jordan and be this standout athlete, but also be a member of the Bulls and play as part of the team at the same time that you are a center of excellence on your own. That line is really hard to walk. I don't think you do it solo. I don't know anybody who just knows how to do that automatically and ask themselves the right questions on a daily, weekly basis to optimize their performance. If I want to optimize my performance, I coach, as you know, I coach CEOs now. I coach executives at major companies, and I have a coach, mm-hmm. right? Because I want to optimize my performance.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's really what it's about. It's about performance optimization. And we know and the best CEOs in the world. And when I was the CEO of Savonix, I had Fortune 50 companies as my customers, major insurance companies. The CEOs of those major insurance companies have coaches, right? The best CEOs in the world have coaches. Yeah, so
they just don't advertise that, or it's not on their company literature.
Why would that's like advertising that you have a therapist? Most people don't do that, even if they have one, right? But the best CEOs in the world have coaches. It comes out. How I found that out was, having breakfast with them after we closed a deal, and I would ask them questions about their role, because I was curious about what it's like to lead, a multi-billion-dollar multinational organization. And what would come out is a lot of information about how they thought about their role, but also how vital they viewed their coach to be to their success.
So one of the things I was thinking about the other day was back to this professional athlete analogy, right? Yeah. So if I'm a venture CEO and I'm trying to raise money for my organization, I am actually kind of like a athlete trying to get a contract. Mm-hmm. And I better be in really great shape.
Yep.
But the job here, I don't know too many professional athletes that will work for 12, 18, 20 hours a day like many of the CEOs we talk to. Yeah. So this is more grueling physically,
mm-hmm. It is.
Mentally,
it is.
Spiritually,
it is.
Emotionally.
It is.
I mean, there's no season and then next year we try again. There's
no downtime.
Go or die.
Yeah, it's go or die.
I liken it to the Olympic downhill ski run, like on the edge of greatness and disaster at every turn.
Yeah.
And if you don't screw up, you're still not assured to win, and you got to go like there's a devil behind you. And it may just work out for you, but we'll see. Millimeters and microns make a difference, right? It's the hardest thing in the world. I think being an entrepreneurial CEO is the hardest job. So
it is.
Why don't more of us treat it like a athletics role? Because the physical strength you have, the rest you have, your cognitive abilities and so forth, you do need to be at a high peak performance. Why isn't more of this known? I feel like I discovered something, but I didn't. But it wasn't talked about.
This is interesting because one of my investors in my company was a fund called Startup Health. And it was really interesting to see how they thought about making an investment in my company. The questions they were asking me, they asked me about my habits. They were like, tell me about, what do you do day to day? When do you get up? What do you do after you get up? When do you get to the office? How late do you stay? What do you do to refresh and recharge? Do you sleep well? They were asking me questions about my sleep, and they're a VC. And what I realized later as I got to know them was they look for healthy habits before they write a check, because one of the things that they're thinking about is, can you go the distance?
Mm-hmm.
You can't not sleep for years on end and perform. Do you know, if with one night of poor sleep, that's less than 6 hours, you lose 13 IQ points the next day. What VC wants their CEOs operating at suboptimal intellectual capability on an ongoing basis? Nobody. And so it is like athleticism. You need to eat correctly. You need to exercise and condition your body to endure the physical stress, the emotional stress of this job. So you need a healthy cardiovascular system. You need to sleep. You need to be thinking of yourself as a performance athlete. And when I started to do that, it really did change my health, but it changed how I showed up at work. It changed how my investors and my team perceived me. It made a huge shift in my job. And a lot of that came, from I'm a neuroscientist. And so I do understand how the brain works, and I get that piece. If I were going to run a marathon, or if I were going to try to play professional baseball, what would I do? Well, I would condition myself physically. I would eat a diet that was in line with keeping my body healthy. I would make sure that I was rested so that I could perform physically and mentally. I would probably get a coach or join a team, right? Because I would want to make sure that I was getting advice on my form and how I moved and how I performed.
Track your performance.
Track your performance. I use, here's my Apple Watch. Why am I more concerned about tracking my steps per day as a CEO than I am about tracking my performance, right? And our ability to track our own performance, as it turns out, is really, really poor. And if anybody wears a Fitbit or an Apple Watch, they're going to know, I feel like I just did this. And you'll look at your watch and you're like,
what?
That was 6. What?
Yep.
I felt like I just swam 3,000 meters. I swam 1,500, or I felt like that was a 12,000 step walk. It was 6,000. I got my heart rate up. No, you did not. It turns out we are very, very, very poor, right?
At estimates, yep. We are bad at estimates.
At estimating our own performance. We suck at it. Anybody, by the way, who's a parent knows this.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we suck at estimating our own performance. So the most vital thing I've ever done, start a business, hire employees, take other people's money. I'm going to do that flying solo by the seat of my pants without somebody in my corner helping me measure my performance. Doesn't seem like a good idea. It didn't to me. That was why I stopped coaching almost from day one. I had 3 different coaches across my CEO career.
No, that's really great. And, the responses back, if you've been coached well, you end up being a pretty darn good coach if you've got the acumen for it. And so the responses back from the people you coach have been very, very positive as well, as you would expect. The seasons of that fit, I think, change, right? So How do you know you need a coach now, and how do you know you need to move on and get a new coach?
Or maybe get it or additive or different. Because some of the executives I'm coaching are seeing me for some very specific stuff around biofeedback, around thoughts, feelings, behavior, how they show up at work, what I call the inside game. I'm really good at helping executives and CEOs think about, what is my inside game? What are the stories I tell myself about myself, my team, my company, that impact my feelings, which impacts my behavior, which impacts my business, right? And how do I really exert control over my own inside game, so that only
you mean that's possible?
It totally is.
I completely agree, but it's a pernicious myth out there that it is not within your control. I remember when I had employees for the first time, I had it in me, this, work and think long term and so forth. And I would bring these folks in, and they would walk around and go, I'm hungry. They couldn't do their job because they were hungry. So when they said hungry 5 times, I go, that's it, you're going to lunch now. And they should have skipped it. They should have skipped it for their own health, really, but they were so they were so kind of in their physical body that their mental processes were following the basic stimuli they were getting. Like, we had an entire team of planarium worms, right? You heat it up and the worm moves away. That's what it was like. And I'm not putting these folks down. They're good-hearted, wonderful, salt-of-the-earth people, but they are not complicated. One of the things I've been seeing, too, and I think I'd like your comment on this one, especially when around the context of keeping and changing coaches. One of the things I see here is that inside game doesn't even come up in many cases. This notion that I can control myself and can begin to do this, most people shy away from even saying that that's possible. Right. And it's imperative.
Yeah.
You as a CEO cannot have loud noises or sudden movements, but you're in a fishbowl.
Yeah.
So you got to be on.
All the time.
How'd you learn that? And how do you help people learn that today?
I learned it the hard way.
Yep.
By really really, I'm not going to say the F-bomb in this interview, by really messing it up. What I realized was I actually wrote this down and I use it. It's in one of the worksheets I give to CEOs I work with. I give them my own inside game. I'm like, here's all the stuff I was telling myself when I started my company. And by the way, it's not good. It's not overwhelmingly positive stuff. It's not like, there was part of me that's like, you don't do this if you don't think you're going to be one of the 5% that make it. But then once you start the business and you hire people and you have employees and you have investors, then it turns out the inside games for me and for most CEOs that I've coached, it shifts. It goes from, this is going to be awesome, to, oh my God, what have I done? I've taken this money. I'm how can I do this? You start and there's an evolutionary basis for this, because only our anxious ancestors survived to pass on their genes to us. The Pollyannas got eaten by a lion because they were walking around going, nothing, everything, every little noise is just a squirrel and life is great. Yeah, they're dead. They did not survive to pass on their genes. It's only the paranoid jerks that survive to pass on their genes.
Wait, you mean to tell us the fact that we're all on Prozac and Zoloft and all that sort of stuff is
evolutionary.
Bioevolutionary?
There's
we're just supposed to be unhappy?
Reality to it, yeah.
I agree.
We have amygdalas, this little peanut in our brain. And the interesting thing is the stress response, which most people think of as fight or flight, but is fight, flight, or freeze. And the freeze is really important in the CEO role. Mm-hmm. Because the freezing is where you see the CEO who can't make a decision. They're frozen, right? And that happens. So our modern bodies don't distinguish between the threat of a bear chasing us and an investor being pissed off. Our bodies respond the same way. The same catecholamine hormones flood our system, whether we have a gun held to our head or we're in a political infight with a board member. Doesn't matter. Our bodies treat those things as the same life and death reality. Here's a clue. They're not.
Right.
And we actually have to take control of our mental processes, our inside game. If we're gonna play this game, the game of startup CEO, well, and it is 3-dimensional chess. So I can't let that peanut in my brain hijack every single meeting, every single interaction if I'm going to be successful. I have to learn to go, okay, no, this is not life and death. It's important, but I'm not going to die. I might get fired if I overreact, or if I don't slow this shit down and stop and think about what is my best play here. And what I really learned is sometimes as a CEO, the best thing for me to do was to shut up and do nothing.
Yep. The hard one.
And let some time flow over people. Wait. But here's the thing, when you're in a stress response, that's not your first waiting. There's no waiting. That's not your first instinct. Right. So it is, I think, really important to get a hold of your inside game in this role. And if you can do that, you're going to be phenomenally successful despite your best efforts to trip over yourself.
Well, I do believe you can learn faster, you can react better, you can respond better if you're in a good space physically, but then mentally, in the self-talk, as you know, as you were just describing, is a really, really big thing. The last point here was about the amygdala. You said if I'm tired, I lose 13 IQ points.
Yep.
So when my amygdala fires, it shuts down a tremendous amount of cognition as well.
It does. So what happens is what is called cognitive tunneling. So it's like your cognitive peripheral vision goes away and the only thing you see is this thing. So, and how I like to illustrate that is when something in our life really goes wrong, really big, we lose a job or a relationship ends or a child is very sick. If a person listening to this interview can think about the last time something like that happened, how they thought about their life, what we tend to do is we only see the problem and we forget all the other stuff that's still good, that is still true. There's still all this other good stuff in our life, but we're not looking at it. It's out here on the edges because this fire, right, is the only thing that's occupying our attention. And you might think, oh, that's good, right? Cognitive narrowing is good for a CEO because now I'm just focused on this problem I need to solve. Cognitive narrowing is good if I'm being chased by a bear and the only thing I need to do is figure out how to not get eaten. That's actually really good for that situation. I don't want to be thinking about, whatever, anything else other than survival.
Yeah.
I want that talk. But the problem with our brain is it doesn't distinguish between that threat and this problem at work, where actually it's not in my best interest to be that narrow cognitively. I need to be looking at, I'm the CEO. I got to look at everything when I make a decision. I need my peripheral vision. I need to remember that, you know what? Yes, this one employee in this department has gone off the farm, but there's still a lot of other good people on that team. How do I leverage those people maybe to bring that person back? I need to be looking at the whole picture. Mm-hmm. If I'm not, forest for the trees thinking, it's not good. And so it is one of those things where these natural biological stress responses actually keep us from performing our best if we don't learn what they are and how to master our insight game. And I feel like that's probably the most important thing to do.
Yeah, I think I want to stop on that point. Next time we do this, we're going to talk about other parts of the inside game, but also we're going to talk about, the bigger surprises around what made performance accelerate versus not. So, but I think we can leave it at that. This will be plenty enough for us to stop on.